This audio was not meant to be found. It does not circulate endlessly. It does not chase attention. It appears only at moments of quiet convergence, when an old version of you is dissolving and a new one is preparing to emerge. If you are hearing this now, something within you has already shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically, but fundamentally. Tonight is not another night. It is a threshold. There are moments when the universe grows silent, not because nothing is happening, but because everything is about to realign. You may have felt it today, a subtle restlessness, a strange calm, a sense that something is ending without fully knowing what begins next. This is the pause before ascent, the stillness before expansion, the moment just before reality reorganizes itself around a higher version of you. This audio contains no instructions to force change, no techniques to chase outcomes, no promises made to the ego. What follows is a remembering, a recalibration, an initiation into the next level of your becoming. You are not here by accident. You are here because the version of you that could receive this has already been activated. Listen as if tonight matters, because it does. Chapter 1. The Signal Before the Shift. There is always a signal before a shift, though it rarely announces itself with spectacle. It does not arrive with fireworks or certainty. Instead, it moves quietly through your awareness, subtle as a change in air pressure before a storm. Most people mistake it for restlessness, fatigue, or an unnameable sense that something is off. But those who have crossed thresholds before recognize it instantly. This is the signal, the moment when reality begins loosening its grip on the version of you that is no longer sustainable. You may have felt it today. A strange pause in momentum, a feeling that familiar routines suddenly lack weight. Conversations that once mattered now feel hollow. Goals that once energized you no longer spark the same urgency. Nothing is wrong, yet nothing fits quite the same. This is not confusion, it is calibration. Consciousness withdrawing energy from an outdated configuration in preparation for something more expansive. Before every level up, the mind searches for explanations. It wants reasons, labels, and reassurance. It asks, "What am I supposed to do?" Or, "Why do I feel like this?" But the signal does not come to be analyzed. It comes to be noticed. When you try to solve it too quickly, you interrupt the very process designed to carry you forward. The signal often feels like a thinning of reality, as if the world has lost a layer of density. Time behaves differently. Moments stretch. Distractions lose their grip. You may find yourself staring into space, not lost but suspended. This suspension is intentional. It is the space required for reorganization. Just as a computer pauses before installing a major update, consciousness slows the system so deeper changes can integrate without corruption. Many mistake this phase for stagnation. They panic and try to force movement. They fill the quiet with noise, the stillness with effort. But this only delays the shift. The signal is asking for cooperation, not control. It is inviting you to stop running old programs while new ones are being installed. There is a reason this audio appears now. Not because you searched hard enough, but because your internal state matched the conditions required to receive it. These moments are rare, not because growth is rare, but because readiness is. Most people rush past the signal, numbing it with activity or doubt. Few allow themselves to linger in the doorway long enough for the transition to complete. The signal before the shift often carries emotional contradictions. You may feel both heavy and peaceful, both tired and alert, both detached and deeply aware. This paradox confuses the logical mind, which prefers clear categories. But transformation does not operate in straight lines. It unfolds in overlapping layers. While one identity dissolves, another gathers coherence beneath the surface. This is why the signal feels intimate, personal, almost secret. It is not meant to be broadcast or validated. It is meant to be honored. When you recognize it without resisting, something inside you relaxes. The nervous system softens, the body exhales, and in that relaxation, the next level finds space to anchor. Every significant change in your life was preceded by a moment like this. A quiet knowing, a subtle discomfort, a sense that the ground beneath you was shifting, even if nothing external had changed yet. Looking back, you can trace the pattern. The signal always arrived first. You just didn't know what it was at the time. Tonight, you are being invited to recognize it consciously, not to rush it, not to define it, not to demand outcomes from it, only to acknowledge something is moving. This movement is not outside you. It is not the world deciding your fate. It is consciousness responding to its own expansion through you. The old level has delivered everything it could. The new one cannot arrive until the previous configuration loosens its hold. If you allow this moment to be what it is, without forcing clarity or action, you assist the transition more than any technique ever could. Presence is the permission slip. Awareness is the agreement. So tonight, do not try to become better. Do not try to fix yourself. Do not try to figure out what comes next. Simply notice the signal. Let it exist without commentary. Let it breathe without interruption. Let it do what it came to do. Because this signal is not a warning. It is a confirmation. You are not falling behind, or you are not losing direction. You are standing at the edge of a recalibration that will soon make sense in ways words cannot capture yet. This is the moment before the shift becomes visible. And visibility always comes later. For now, awareness is enough. Chapter 2. Why it's happening now. Nothing in your life is late. Nothing is early. What you are experiencing now could not have occurred yesterday, and it would lose its potency if postponed until tomorrow. Timing, in the deeper architecture of reality, is not dictated by calendars or effort, but by readiness. And readiness is not something you decide, it is something you become. This is why the shift is happening now. For a long time, parts of you were still negotiating with the past. Old identities were still being consulted. Old fears were still being entertained as advisors. Even when you desired more, some portion of your awareness was anchored to what felt familiar. Growth was wanted, but not yet inevitable. The universe does not force inevitability. It waits for coherence. That coherence has quietly formed. Readiness arrives when enough internal contradictions dissolve, when the version of you that wanted change and the version of you that feared it stop pulling in opposite directions, when desire no longer needs constant motivation to stay alive, when exhaustion with the old becomes deeper than fear of the new. This is the moment you are in now. You did not miss a window. You did not delay your destiny. You were assembling the conditions. Every experience you thought slowed you down was refining you. Every delay was teaching you something about timing, trust, or alignment. Even moments of regression served a purpose. They showed you what no longer fit. They clarified what you could not return to without shrinking. This clarity is a form of readiness few people ever achieve. That is why tonight feels different. There is less bargaining energy in you now. Less trying to convince yourself, less need for signs. Something has settled. A quiet resolve has taken root, not loud enough to announce itself, but stable enough to hold weight. This resolve is what opens the gate. Change does not arrive when you want it. It arrives when you stop negotiating with it. The universe responds most precisely when your internal state becomes simple. Not dramatic, not intense. Simple. One direction, one frequency, when your thoughts, emotions, and expectations stop arguing with each other. In that simplicity, timing clicks into place like a lock recognizing its key. You may wonder why others seem to leap ahead while you were asked to wait. But waiting was never about punishment or testing. It was about preparation for a different altitude. Some changes can be handled with momentum. Others require structure, stability, and a nervous system capable of holding expansion without collapse. You were being built for the latter. Now, the weight you can carry has changed. This is why things that once overwhelmed you feel distant. Why reactions that once consumed you now pass more quickly. Why certain triggers no longer hook you the way they used to. These are not random improvements. They are indicators that your internal capacity has expanded enough to support a new configuration of reality. The shift happens now because resistance has finally thinned. Not disappeared completely, but softened enough to allow movement. Like ice cracking before it breaks apart, the rigidity that held you in place has begun to fracture. Life senses this. Consciousness responds immediately to openings. It does not need permission, only availability. This is availability. You may feel tempted to ask what exactly is coming, but readiness does not require foresight. It requires trust in the intelligence that brought you here. The same awareness that guided you through confusion, contraction, and questioning did not suddenly become careless. It knows what it is doing, and it knows when to move. The reason tonight matters is not because something dramatic must occur externally. It matters because recognition stabilizes the transition. When you know why something is happening, you stop resisting it unconsciously. You stop pulling energy backward. You allow the rearrangement to proceed without interference. Many people experience shifts without awareness and spend months disoriented, trying to rebuild what already expired. You are being given orientation before the restructuring completes. This is rare, and it is intentional. So do not rush to define what this level up means. Definitions will come later. First comes alignment. First comes the internal click that says, I am ready to let the old structure dissolve without clinging. Tonight is not the reward, it is the crossing. You are not being tested, you are being trusted. Trusted to let go without panic. Trusted to allow clarity to unfold naturally. Trusted to stand in the unknown without retreating to the familiar. This is why it is happening now. Because you can hold it now. Because you no longer need to be convinced. Because the version of you required for what comes next already exists quietly beneath the surface, waiting for the final permission, acceptance. And that permission is not spoken aloud. It is felt. When you feel it, you will know. Chapter 3. The collapse that precedes expansion. Before anything expands, it loosens. Before anything rises, it releases its grip on the ground it once depended on. This is the part few are prepared for. The collapse that comes before expansion does not look like progress. It looks like unraveling. When the shift begins to gain momentum, structures you relied on start to weaken. Motivation fades, certainty dissolves. Old coping strategies stop working. You may feel less capable, less driven, less sure of yourself than before. This is not regression, it is disassembly. Expansion cannot be built on foundations designed for a smaller version of you. The collapse arrives as a quiet undoing. It is rarely dramatic enough to be recognized as transformation. More often, it appears as boredom, frustration, or emotional heaviness without a clear cause. You might feel unproductive, disconnected, or strangely uninterested in things that once defined you. The mind interprets this as failure. Consciousness knows it as preparation. What is collapsing is not you. It is the scaffolding that once held you in place. Identity structures are efficient until they are not. Roles, habits, ambitions, and self-concepts are useful only as long as they match your internal frequency. When that frequency rises, the structures strain. They begin to creak. Eventually, they must give way. This giving way feels like loss because the ego confuses familiarity with safety. But safety at a lower level becomes suffocation at a higher one. This is why the collapse often brings exhaustion. You are no longer fueled by the same incentives. Fear loses its motivational power. External validation feels empty. Old rewards fail to stimulate you. Without realizing it, you are being weaned off outdated fuel sources. The system is preparing to run on something cleaner, quieter, and more sustainable. Many people misinterpret this phase and attempt to rebuild what is already dissolving. They double down on discipline, push harder, or criticize themselves for losing momentum. This resistance prolongs the collapse and increases discomfort. What is trying to fall apart will fall apart eventually. The only choice is whether you let it do so gracefully. The collapse is not a punishment for doing something wrong. It is evidence that something went right long enough to be outgrown. You may notice emotional waves rising without clear triggers, grief for things you can't name, irritation without direction, a sense of emptiness that feels unfamiliar. These are signals of detachment. Energy is withdrawing from old attachments to make room for new ones that are not yet visible. Think of it as a room being cleared before new furniture arrives. For a time, the space looks barren, echoing, unfinished. But the emptiness is functional. It is not absence. It is availability. During this phase, the mind searches desperately for certainty. It asks for plans, reassurance, and timelines. But collapse does not respond to logic. It responds to allowance. The more you let the disintegration occur without judgment, the faster it completes its work. Expansion is not something you add. It is something you uncover once what no longer fits is removed. This is why the collapse often isolates you. Social roles may feel awkward. Certain relationships may feel distant or misaligned. Not because anything is wrong, but because you are between versions. The old one is no longer fully accessible. The new one has not yet stabilized. This in-between space can feel lonely, but it is temporary. What matters most here is not action, but gentleness. Rest becomes productive. Stillness becomes strategic. Allowing yourself to feel uncertain without rushing to fix it becomes an act of intelligence. The collapse teaches you how to be without performing, how to exist without proving, how to trust yourself without constant reinforcement. These lessons are not optional, they are structural. Without them, expansion would fracture you. You may feel tempted to ask when this phase ends. It ends when you stop fighting it, when you stop trying to extract meaning prematurely, when you allow the old architecture to fall without trying to salvage every piece. Nothing essential will be lost, only what cannot travel with you. The collapse precedes expansion because it creates integrity. It ensures that what rises next is coherent, stable, and aligned with who you have become, not who you once were. Without collapse, expansion would be hollow, inflated, but unsupported. So if tonight you feel tender, tired, or undefined, know this: the collapse is doing its work. It is not breaking you. It is freeing you from the need to stay small enough to survive outdated structures. Let what wants to fall, fall. What rises after will not require force. It will arrive naturally, and it will fit. Chapter 4. The version of you that cannot go forward. There is a version of you that cannot come with you. Not because it is wrong, broken, or unworthy, but because it was built for a world you have already outgrown. Every expansion requires a shedding, and this shedding is not dramatic. It is quiet. It happens in moments when you no longer recognize yourself in old reactions, old desires, or old fears. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about releasing who you no longer need to be. The version that cannot go forward is often the one that kept you safe when you did not yet know your own strength. The one that anticipated rejection before it arrived. The one that over-prepared, over-explained, or overextended in order to secure belonging. This version was intelligent, resourceful, necessary. But its strategies are now too heavy for the altitude you are reaching. You may notice this version surfacing when uncertainty appears. It reaches for control. It wants guarantees. It asks for proof before moving. It fears making the wrong choice because it learned long ago that mistakes were costly. This vigilance once protected you. Now it restricts you. The challenge is that this version does not leave easily. It does not recognize that its job is complete. It still believes danger is imminent, even when the environment has changed. It whispers caution when courage is required. It asks you to shrink when expansion is available. This is why the transition feels internal and intimate. You are not fighting the world. You are negotiating with an identity. Letting go of this version can feel like betrayal. You may feel guilt for wanting more ease, shame for desiring visibility, fear that without your old defenses, you will be exposed. These feelings are not signs that you should stop. They are signs that you are touching the edge of an identity boundary. Growth always feels disloyal to the past version that survived for you. The key is not to reject this version, but to recognize its limits. You can thank it without obeying it. You can honor its service without allowing it to dictate your future. This is not abandonment. It is integration. The version of you that cannot go forward is often tied to conditions. Conditional worth, conditional safety, conditional permission to rest or receive. It learned that love was earned, success was fragile, and ease was suspicious. These beliefs formed a structure that helped you navigate earlier terrain, but that structure cannot support the weight of what you are becoming. Expansion requires trust. Trust requires softness. Softness is impossible while armored. This is why the old version resists. Armor feels safer than openness, even when it becomes painful. But armor also blocks nourishment. It keeps out harm and help alike. At higher levels, this becomes unsustainable. You may feel this version trying to reassert itself now, questioning your readiness, reminding you of past failures, warning you not to get your hopes up. This is not intuition. It is memory speaking from a context that no longer exists. The difference is subtle but essential. Intuition feels calm, even when it says no. Fear feels urgent, even when it says wait. As you move forward, you will be asked to choose which voice to follow without absolute certainty. This is the initiation, not into courage as an act, but into courage as a state of being. The version of you that cannot go forward is not wrong. It is simply complete. It has done its work. Its methods no longer align with the environment you are entering. Carrying it forward would be like bringing winter clothing into a climate that requires lightness and flow. Release does not happen all at once. It happens through small refusals to react the old way. Through pauses where you choose presence over pattern. Through moments where you allow yourself to be seen without preemptive defense. These moments feel uncomfortable because they are unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean unsafe. It means new. You do not need to announce this release. You do not need to explain it to anyone. You do not need to make a ceremony of it. The letting go happens quietly as you stop consulting the version of you that needed to survive rather than expand. Tonight, notice which impulses feel heavy, which thoughts feel rehearsed, which reactions feel automatic rather than alive. These are the fingerprints of an identity that has reached its limit. And then notice the space that appears when you do not follow them. That space is not emptiness, it is possibility. The version of you that goes forward does not need to be constructed. It already exists beneath the layers that are falling away. As the old loosens its grip, the new rises naturally, without force, without fear. This is not loss, it is alignment. And what aligns will carry you further than effort ever could. Chapter 5. The silence that rewrites reality. There is a silence that arrives before everything changes. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of recalibration. It does not feel empty. It feels expectant, like the breath held just before a sentence is spoken or the pause before music begins. This silence is not a void. It is an intelligence at work. When reality prepares to rewrite itself, it lowers the volume. You may notice this as a withdrawal of noise. External distractions lose their pull. Internal chatter softens. Even your desire to explain or narrate your experience begins to fade. The mind, accustomed to constant interpretation, becomes unsettled by this quiet. It asks, "Why do I feel so still?" Or, "Why don't I know what to think right now?" But the silence does not come to be filled. It comes to make space. This is the moment when the old storyline dissolves. For much of your life, reality responded to the momentum of your thoughts. Beliefs repeated themselves. Patterns reinforced patterns. Cause followed cause. But at certain thresholds, this linear flow must be interrupted. The silence acts as a reset. It suspends the habitual feedback loop between thought and outcome long enough for a new configuration to form. This is why the silence can feel disorienting. You are no longer being pulled forward by the old narrative, but the new one has not yet spoken. You are between signals, between instructions, between identities. To the ego, this feels like nothing. To consciousness, it is everything. In silence, the rules loosen. This is where deeply ingrained assumptions lose their authority, where automatic reactions lose their urgency, where beliefs that once felt unquestionable begin to feel optional. The silence gently erases the rigidity of "this is how it must be" and replaces it with a softer truth: "this is not yet decided." Reality becomes malleable here. Most people rush through this phase because they mistake silence for stagnation. They reintroduce noise to feel productive again. They fill the space with opinions, plans, or distractions. In doing so, they restore the old pattern before the rewrite can complete. But you are being invited to do something different. To stay. Staying does not mean withdrawing from life. It means not rushing to define what is happening. It means allowing ambiguity without panic. It means trusting that clarity is not absent, only incubating. The silence is not withholding answers. It is reorganizing the questions. You may feel unusually neutral during this time, not particularly happy or unhappy, not driven or resistant, just present. This neutrality is not apathy, it is balance. It is the nervous system settling into a state where it can receive new information without distortion. In this state, subtle shifts occur, perceptions realign, priorities reorder themselves without conscious effort. What once felt urgent fades, what once felt distant draws closer. The silence allows reality to update its parameters around who you are now, not who you were. This is why decisions made from silence feel different. They are not reactive, they are clean. They carry less emotional residue. They do not require justification. They feel simple, even when they are significant. The silence teaches you something essential. You do not need constant input to evolve. You do not need to chase insight or manufacture certainty. When you stop interfering, intelligence moves freely. This is the same silence that mystics, artists, and innovators have always guarded. The space where inspiration enters, the interval where intuition sharpens, the pause where new worlds take shape before being spoken into existence. Tonight, this silence is available to you, not as something to achieve, but as something already present beneath the noise. You access it not by effort, but by permission, by letting yourself not know for a moment, by allowing stillness to be sufficient. If you listen closely, you may sense that the silence is not blank. It hums. It carries a subtle coherence. It feels stable, assured, as if something larger than thought is holding you steady while the reconfiguration completes. This is the silence that rewrites reality, because it interrupts the old script long enough for a new one to be written. You do not need to understand how this works. You do not need to direct it. You do not need to narrate it. Your only role is to not disturb it prematurely. Let the quiet do its work. Soon words will return, clarity will sharpen, direction will emerge, but it will arrive differently than before, less forced, less anxious, more aligned. For now, remain in the silence. It is not the absence of movement, it is movement at its deepest level. Chapter 6. Energy reorganizes before circumstances do. Before your life changes on the outside, it changes on the inside in ways that are almost imperceptible at first. This is the order of things. Energy always moves ahead of form. Consciousness always rearranges itself before reality reflects the shift. When you do not understand this sequence, you may believe nothing is happening, when in truth, everything already has. The earliest stage of transformation does not announce itself through events. It announces itself through subtle internal rearrangements. Your emotional responses shift before your environment does. Your tolerance changes before your circumstances do. What you are willing to entertain, accept, or endure quietly updates itself long before the world catches up. This is why it can feel disorienting. You may look at your life and see the same people, the same routines, the same obligations, yet something inside you no longer matches the setting. You feel out of place without knowing why. You feel misaligned even though nothing obvious has gone wrong. This is not dissatisfaction, it is misfit. Your internal frequency has moved ahead of the external environment. Energy has already gone where reality has not yet arrived. At this stage, many people attempt to force circumstances to change prematurely. They confront, quit, demand, or escape. Not because they are wrong, but because they misread the signal. They believe the discomfort means immediate action is required. Sometimes it does, often it does not. Often it means the internal shift needs time to stabilize before the outer world can reorganize safely. Think of energy as the blueprint and circumstances as the construction. If the blueprint is still being revised, rushing construction creates instability. Walls crack, foundations weaken. The structure cannot hold. This is why patience at this stage is not passive, it is precise. Energy reorganization feels like a quiet internal sorting. Values clarify, boundaries strengthen without confrontation, desires simplify. You may notice that you stop explaining yourself as much. Stop chasing validation. Stop reacting to things that once provoked you. These are not small changes. They are structural. The nervous system plays a crucial role here. Expansion requires capacity. If your system is accustomed to operating in survival mode, sudden upgrades can feel overwhelming. So energy moves first to create safety. It settles the body. It softens hypervigilance. It teaches you how to be at rest without collapsing. Only once safety is established can new circumstances enter without triggering self-sabotage. This is why the universe often delays visible change until your internal environment can sustain it. It is not withholding. It is preparing you to receive without destruction. What looks like stagnation is often integration. You may notice moments of clarity followed by periods of fog, moments of excitement followed by deep rest. This rhythm is intentional. Energy pulses forward, then settles, advances, then grounds. This is how coherence is built. The mind, however, prefers linear progress. It wants constant evidence. It wants reassurance that things are moving. When it does not receive this, it invents stories of failure or regression. These stories are not intuitive, they are defensive. True intuition does not rush, it steadies. If you listen carefully, you may notice that your reactions are slowing down. There is more space between stimulus and response. This space is power. It means you are no longer operating purely from conditioning. You are becoming choice-aware. That awareness must come before circumstances shift, otherwise you would recreate the same patterns in a new setting. Energy reorganizes to prevent repetition. This is why certain desires fall away during this phase. Not because they were wrong, but because they were rooted in an older frequency. You may no longer want what you once thought you needed. This can feel like loss, but it is actually refinement. Desire becomes more precise as alignment deepens. You may also notice resistance to things that once felt acceptable. Tolerance drops. Patience for misalignment thins. This is not intolerance, it is clarity. Energy no longer agrees to be diluted. The external world responds slowly because it must rearrange many variables to match your new state. Relationships shift. Opportunities reroute. Timing recalibrates. These changes require coordination beyond your awareness. Energy moves first because it is efficient. Matter follows because it is precise. If you interfere too early, you slow the process. Trust here is not blind faith. It is pattern recognition. You have experienced this before, even if you did not name it. Looking back, you can identify moments when you felt internally different long before life reflected it. The reflection always came later. It always caught up. Tonight, you are being asked to recognize where energy has already moved. Notice what no longer drains you the same way. Notice what no longer excites you artificially. Notice where your attention naturally rests now. These are indicators, not of loss, but of progression. The mistake is to measure change by circumstance alone. The truth is that circumstance is the slowest moving layer of reality. Energy is the fastest. Consciousness moves first. Identity follows. Behavior adjusts. Circumstances rearrange last. This order protects you, so if you feel internally ahead of your life, you are not misaligned. You are early. If you feel like you are waiting for the world to catch up, you are not stuck. You are stabilizing. Do not downgrade your frequency to match old surroundings. Do not rush outcomes to soothe impatience. Do not doubt movement simply because it is quiet. Energy has already shifted. The rest is logistics. And logistics are not your burden to manage. Your role is to remain coherent, to honor the internal reorganization without forcing external confirmation, to let the new frequency become familiar in your body before it becomes visible in your life. When the circumstances arrive, they will feel natural, almost obvious, as if they were always meant to be this way. That is how you know the alignment is complete. Until then, trust the unseen movement. It is already underway. Chapter 7. The Nervous System as the Gateway. Every level up passes through the nervous system first, not through thought, not through intention, not through willpower. The body is the gatekeeper, and it will not open for what it does not feel safe to hold. This is the part most teachings overlook. You can desire expansion with your mind, visualize it with precision, and understand it intellectually, yet still remain stuck if your nervous system associates growth with danger. The body does not respond to logic. It responds to history. It remembers what the mind has long forgotten. This is why transformation is never just mental. It is physiological. Your nervous system learned its patterns long before you had language for them. It learned what to brace against, what to avoid, what to prepare for. It learned when to tighten and when to collapse. These patterns were intelligent responses to past environments. They kept you alive, connected, functioning. But what once ensured survival can later block expansion. At higher levels, growth requires openness. Openness requires safety. Safety is a bodily experience, not an idea. When expansion approaches, the nervous system scans for threat. If it detects unfamiliar intensity, visibility, responsibility, or change, it may respond with anxiety, fatigue, numbness, or self-sabotage. Not because you are weak, but because the system is protecting you from what it does not yet recognize as safe. This is why leveling up can feel uncomfortable even when it is desired. You may notice sudden tiredness when opportunities appear, hesitation when momentum builds, doubt when clarity emerges. These are not signs of misalignment. They are signals that your nervous system is being asked to stretch beyond its current capacity. The gateway does not open through force, it opens through regulation. Regulation means teaching the body that expansion does not equal threat, that ease does not precede collapse, that stability can coexist with growth. This teaching happens through experience, not affirmation. Small moments of safety accumulate, moments where you allow yourself to rest without consequence, moments where you express truth without punishment, moments where you receive without guilt. Each of these rewires the system. Each tells the body, this level is survivable. Only then does the gate open wider. This is why growth unfolds in waves. Expansion followed by integration, stretch followed by rest. The system learns through repetition, not shock. Sudden changes that bypass the nervous system often collapse just as quickly because the body cannot sustain them. Sustainable transformation is gentle. You may notice that your body is asking for slower mornings, quieter evenings, less stimulation. This is not withdrawal. It is recalibration. The nervous system is reorganizing to support a higher baseline. It needs space to do so. Ignoring this need creates resistance. Honoring it creates flow. This is also why comparison becomes irrelevant at this stage. Other people's pace does not reflect your capacity. Some systems are conditioned for intensity, others for sensitivity. Neither is superior. Each has its own rhythm of expansion. Your work is not to push your system, it is to listen to it. Listening does not mean obeying fear. It means distinguishing fear from capacity. Fear shouts. Capacity whispers. Fear demands urgency. Capacity asks for steadiness. When you choose steadiness, the body relaxes. When the body relaxes, it allows more energy to pass through without overload. This is how the gateway widens naturally. Notice how your breath changes when you feel safe. Deeper, slower, fuller. This is not accidental. Breath is the fastest way the nervous system signals readiness. When breath deepens, the gate opens slightly. When breath constricts, the gate narrows. This is why presence matters more than performance. A regulated nervous system can hold joy without bracing, success without panic, love without collapse, visibility without disappearance. These are not personality traits. They are physiological states. You are learning how to inhabit them. This chapter of your journey is not about doing more. It is about becoming safe enough to receive more. The body must trust that what arrives will not overwhelm it. That trust is built through consistency, not intensity. Gentle routines matter here. Familiar anchors, predictable care, moments of embodiment. These are not distractions from growth. They are prerequisites for it. The gateway opens when the body believes you will not abandon it in pursuit of expansion. Many people override their nervous systems in the name of success or spirituality. They bypass rest, ignore signals, suppress discomfort. This works temporarily. Then it collapses. Burnout is not a failure of discipline, it is a failure of regulation. You are being invited to do this differently, to grow without violence, to expand without rupture, to rise without leaving yourself behind. This is why this phase may feel slower than expected. It is not slow, it is thorough. The system is being taught that higher levels are safe to inhabit long term. When that lesson lands, momentum accelerates naturally. You do not need to push the gate open. You need to let the body feel safe enough to open it itself. Tonight, notice where your body softens when you stop striving. Notice how ease feels unfamiliar but relieving. Let that relief be information. It is the signal that regulation is occurring. The nervous system is not blocking your growth. It is ensuring you survive it. When the gate opens fully, you will not feel overwhelmed. You will feel ready, calm, grounded, as if this level was always meant to be yours, because it was. And your body is learning how to live there now. Chapter 8. Leaving the timeline that no longer matches you. There comes a moment when you realize you are no longer fully inside your old life. You still wake up in the same place. You still answer the same messages. You still move through familiar environments. Yet something subtle has shifted. It feels as though you are standing half a step to the side of everything you once called reality. This is not disconnection. This is departure. You do not leave a timeline the way you leave a room. There is no dramatic exit, no slammed door, no announcement of finality. Timelines are not abandoned through force. They are released through resonance. When your frequency no longer matches the conditions that sustain a particular version of reality, you begin to drift out of it naturally. This drifting can feel strange. You may notice that situations resolve without your involvement. Conflicts dissolve before escalating. Opportunities you once chased lose relevance. Certain people fade gently from your orbit, not through conflict, but through quiet misalignment. Nothing collapses catastrophically. It simply stops gripping you. This is how timelines end when they are complete. A timeline is not just a sequence of events. It is an agreement, an energetic contract between who you are and what you experience. When you change internally, that agreement must be renegotiated. If it cannot be updated, it expires. You are not being rejected by your old life. You are outgrowing its terms. The mind often resists this phase because it wants clarity. It asks, "Where am I going?" before fully accepting where it no longer belongs. But consciousness does not move in straight lines. It moves through transitions, and transitions require overlap. For a time, you exist between timelines. In this space, nothing feels fully anchored. You may feel less emotionally invested in outcomes, less reactive to drama, less compelled to prove anything. This neutrality can feel unsettling if you equate intensity with aliveness. But neutrality is not numbness. It is freedom from entanglement. You are no longer feeding the old loop. Timelines are sustained by repetition, the same thoughts, the same emotional responses, the same interpretations. When you stop repeating them, the timeline loses coherence. It cannot hold you anymore. It begins to dissolve around you, even if others remain inside it. This is why growth can feel lonely. Not because you are alone, but because you are no longer synchronized with the same emotional rhythms. Conversations feel familiar, but flat. Humor lands differently. Concerns that once dominated feel distant. You are not superior. You are simply elsewhere. Trying to force yourself to stay creates friction. If you attempt to reinsert yourself fully into a timeline that no longer matches you, you may feel exhaustion, irritation, or sadness without a clear reason. This is not ingratitude, it is misalignment. Your energy is being asked to compress itself to fit a container that has become too small. You cannot unknow what you have integrated. You cannot return without fragmentation. Leaving a timeline does not mean rejecting your past. It means honoring its role. Every version of reality you inhabited served a purpose. It taught you something. It shaped you. It carried you until it no longer could. Gratitude allows the release to happen without resistance. Resistance is what creates painful endings. Acceptance creates gentle exits. You may notice that choices become easier during this phase, not because you have all the answers, but because certain options no longer register as real possibilities. You are not tempted by them. They do not pull on you. The body knows before the mind catches up. This is the intelligence of resonance. A new timeline does not need to be imagined in detail. It is not constructed through effort. It is entered through alignment. As your internal state stabilizes, you naturally step into environments, relationships, and circumstances that reflect it. This step is often subtle. One conversation leads to another. One decision creates a small deviation. One pause changes a reaction. These micro-shifts alter your trajectory. Over time, you look back and realize you are living a life that once felt unreachable, not because you chased it, but because you became compatible with it. This compatibility is the key. You do not manifest a new timeline by wanting it harder. You manifest it by no longer sustaining the old one. When attention, emotion, and identity disengage, reality reorganizes itself around what remains. What remains is who you are now. There may be moments of grief during this transition, not because something bad happened, but because something meaningful ended. Grief is not always about loss. Sometimes it is about completion. Allow it. It is part of the release. Do not rush to replace what is leaving. Do not fill the space prematurely. The space is the bridge. As the old timeline fades, the new one sharpens. Synchronicities increase. Ease appears in unexpected places. You find yourself in the right place without trying. These are not rewards. They are confirmations that the shift is locking in. You may still feel echoes of the old timeline, habits tugging, thoughts resurfacing. This does not mean you are going backward. It means the transition is integrating. Echoes fade when they are not fed. Tonight, you are not being asked to leap into the future. You are being asked to stop holding the past in place. Let the timeline that no longer matches you dissolve with dignity. Thank it silently. Release it gently. You do not need to burn bridges to cross thresholds. The new timeline is not somewhere else. It is already forming around the version of you that exists now. And with each moment of alignment, you step into it without force, without fear, without announcement. This is how realities change, quietly, naturally, inevitably. Chapter 9. When old patterns lose their grip. There is a moment in every genuine transformation when effort quietly exits the process. Not because discipline has failed, but because it is no longer needed. This is the moment when old patterns begin to lose their grip, not through confrontation, not through suppression, but through irrelevance. Patterns do not disappear because you defeat them. They disappear because you stop matching them. For most of your life, patterns felt powerful because they were familiar. They repeated themselves with such consistency that they appeared permanent. Emotional loops, behavioral habits, internal narratives, each reinforced the other, forming a closed circuit. You reacted, then justified the reaction, then built identity around it. Over time, the pattern became self-sustaining. But patterns are not structures, they are agreements. They persist only as long as your energy continues to flow through them. When your frequency shifts, the pattern loses its fuel. It still exists, but it no longer commands you. Like a radio station drifting out of range, the signal weakens until it fades into static. This is why you may notice that certain habits no longer work. The coping mechanisms you once relied on feel flat. The emotional responses that once erupted automatically now stall halfway. You pause where you used to spiral. You observe where you once reacted. This pause is not hesitation. It is freedom entering the system. You are no longer compelled. Old patterns often dissolve without ceremony. One day, you realize you didn't overthink something that would have consumed you before. Another day, you respond calmly where you once defended yourself. These moments may seem small, but they are seismic. They indicate a shift in authorship. You are no longer being driven by the past. This is unsettling for the mind. The ego is accustomed to identity through struggle. It knows who it is when there is a problem to solve or a wound to manage. When patterns loosen, the ego may panic. It asks, "Who am I without this?" Or, what do I do if I'm not fixing something? This discomfort is not regression. It is the shedding of an outdated identity. Healing does not feel heroic, and it feels quiet. You may even miss the intensity of old patterns, not because they were good for you, but because they were familiar. Intensity creates a sense of meaning. When it fades, neutrality can feel empty until you realize it is simply peaceful. Peace feels strange to a system trained in survival. As patterns lose their grip, you may notice increased choice. You are no longer locked into a single response. You can decide how much energy to give. You can disengage without guilt. You can say no without explaining. These are not skills you learned. They are capacities that emerged when resistance dissolved. This is why forcing change never works long-term. It replaces one pattern with another. True transformation happens when the system no longer needs the pattern to regulate itself. When safety is internalized, when worth is not negotiated, when identity is not dependent on reaction. At this stage, self-improvement becomes unnecessary. You are no longer trying to fix yourself because you no longer experience yourself as broken. The urge to monitor every thought fades. You trust your baseline. You trust your recovery. You trust your ability to respond when needed. This trust is earned, not assumed. It comes from repeated evidence that you can move through life without collapsing into old loops, that you can feel discomfort without dramatizing it, that you can experience emotion without being consumed by it. Patterns lose their grip when you stop feeding them attention, explanation, and identity. They starve gently. They fall away naturally. You do not have to hunt them down. You simply stop inviting them into the center of your experience. This is why awareness is more powerful than effort. Awareness creates distance. Distance creates choice. Choice dissolves compulsion. You may still notice echoes of old patterns. A familiar thought arises. A reflexive emotion flickers. This does not mean the pattern has returned. It means it is completing its exit. Old habits do not vanish instantly. They fade. And fading is progress. The mistake is to panic when an old pattern reappears briefly. Panic feeds it. Judgment reactivates it. Curiosity dissolves it. When you notice without reacting, the pattern finds no anchor. It has nowhere to land. This phase requires gentleness, not vigilance. Gentleness allows the nervous system to trust the change. Harsh self-monitoring recreates the very tension the pattern depended on. You are not here to police yourself. You are here to inhabit yourself. As old patterns lose their grip, a new rhythm emerges. You begin to act from alignment rather than reaction. Decisions feel cleaner. Boundaries feel natural. You expend less energy maintaining your sense of self. Life feels simpler even when it is complex. This simplicity is not minimalism. It is coherence. Everything begins to work together instead of against itself. Thoughts align with values. Emotions inform rather than overwhelm. Actions follow clarity instead of urgency. This is not perfection. It is integration. You may notice that advice no longer lands the same way. External guidance feels unnecessary, not because you know everything, but because you trust your internal calibration. You are less easily swayed, less reactive to noise, more responsive to truth. This is what it feels like when old patterns lose their grip. Not dramatic and not triumphant, but deeply stabilizing. Tonight, notice where effort has quietly dropped away, where you no longer struggle as you once did, where you no longer argue with yourself. These are signs that the transformation is real. You are not becoming someone new. You are becoming someone unburdened. And what remains when patterns release their hold is not emptiness, it is presence. Chapter 10. The discomfort of becoming larger. There is a discomfort that arrives not because something is wrong, but because something is expanding. It does not feel like pain in the traditional sense. It feels like pressure, like an internal stretching that has no obvious cause. This discomfort is often misunderstood because it does not fit the stories we were taught about growth. We were taught that growth feels good, that alignment feels peaceful, that progress feels rewarding. But there is a phase where becoming larger feels unfamiliar rather than affirming. When your internal capacity increases, your awareness widens before your confidence does. You perceive more, You sense more. You carry more information at once. This heightened awareness can feel overwhelming until it stabilizes. The discomfort is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that your system is learning how to hold more without collapsing. This is the sensation of expansion meeting identity. Your old sense of self was calibrated to a certain range of experience, certain responsibilities, certain emotional intensities, certain levels of visibility and choice. As you outgrow that range, the familiar boundaries dissolve. The mind loses reference points. It asks, "Who am I now?" Not because something is missing, but because something is too large to define yet. This is why discomfort often accompanies clarity. You may know what no longer fits, but feel uncertain about what replaces it. You may sense greater potential while feeling less certain of how to express it. You may feel drawn toward larger spaces, greater responsibility, deeper intimacy, broader impact, while simultaneously wanting to retreat. This tension is not contradiction. It is expansion negotiating with familiarity. The discomfort arises because the nervous system is adjusting to scale. Becoming larger does not mean becoming louder, busier, or more visible in obvious ways. It means your internal world gains depth. Your presence carries weight. Your choices ripple further. Even when you do nothing, you influence more than you used to. This requires calibration. At first, the system responds with caution. You may second-guess yourself more, not less. You may feel exposed even when nothing has changed externally. You may notice a desire to hide, delay, or downplay yourself. This is not self-sabotage. It is the psyche testing its boundaries, asking, is it safe to occupy this much space? The answer must be embodied, not argued. You cannot think your way into comfort with expansion. Comfort comes from lived experience, from taking small steps at the new scale and surviving them, from expressing slightly more truth than before and noticing that nothing breaks, from allowing yourself to be seen without immediate retreat. Each of these moments rewires the system. The discomfort of becoming larger also reveals where you have been unconsciously self-limiting. You may notice habits of shrinking that once felt invisible, downplaying achievements, softening opinions, making yourself palatable. These behaviors were adaptive in earlier contexts. They reduced friction. They preserved belonging. But at this stage, they create internal conflict. Expansion demands congruence. When your internal reality grows and your external expression remains small, tension builds. This tension is not punishment. It is information. It shows you where adjustment is required, not through force, but through permission. Permission to take up space, permission to pause without apologizing, permission to move at your own pace, permission to let others adjust to you. This permission feels radical if you were conditioned to earn it. If you learned that safety depended on being agreeable, useful, or invisible, becoming larger will trigger discomfort by default. The body expects consequences. The mind anticipates rejection. This anticipation must be gently disproven through experience. Expansion stabilizes when it is normalized. You do not need to announce your growth. You do not need to perform confidence. You do not need to justify your evolution. You simply need to remain present as the discomfort passes through. The temptation during this phase is to interpret discomfort as a sign of misalignment, to assume that if something feels uneasy, it must be wrong. But misalignment feels constricting. Expansion feels spacious even when it is uncomfortable. The difference is subtle but unmistakable. Misalignment drains you. Expansion stretches you. Stretching is tiring at first. It requires energy, but it builds capacity. Over time, what once felt overwhelming becomes normal. The system adapts. The new scale becomes the baseline. This is how growth becomes sustainable. You may notice that your tolerance for chaos decreases as you become larger. Not because you are less capable, but because you are more discerning. You no longer need intensity to feel alive. You no longer need drama to feel important. You seek coherence, not stimulation. This shift can feel isolating if your environment remains attuned to a smaller scale. You may feel out of sync, not superior, just mismatched. This mismatch resolves naturally as you align with contexts that reflect your new capacity. Becoming larger is not about accumulation, it is about refinement. Less noise, more signal, less proving, more presence. The discomfort fades as you stop resisting it, as you allow the expansion to settle without questioning its legitimacy, as you trust that you are not imagining your growth. Tonight, notice where you feel stretched, where something feels slightly too big, too real, too possible. Instead of shrinking away, breathe into that space. Let the body register that nothing bad happens when you expand. This is how the discomfort transforms, not by pushing through it, not by analyzing it away, but by staying with it long enough for the system to learn a new normal. You are not uncomfortable because you are failing. You are uncomfortable because you are growing, and growth, when it is real, always changes the shape of what you can hold. Let yourself become larger. Your system is learning how. Chapter 11. The Night Between Versions. There is a night that exists between who you were and who you are becoming. It is not marked on any calendar. It does not announce itself as a milestone. Yet, it is one of the most important passages in any transformation. This is the night between versions, where the old identity has loosened its hold, but the new one has not yet fully arrived. In this space, certainty is suspended. You may feel strangely undefined, not lost, but unanchored, not broken, but unfinished. The familiar internal narrative has gone quiet, and the new one has not yet found its voice. This can feel unsettling to a mind that prefers continuity. But discontinuity is essential here. It creates the gap through which change enters. The night between versions is not dark because something is wrong. It is dark because something is incubating. During this phase, you may notice a reduction in urgency. Goals that once felt pressing no longer demand immediate action. The future does not feel distant or exciting, it feels irrelevant. The present stretches out, quiet and spacious. This is not apathy, it is suspension. Suspension is where recalibration happens. Just as the body pauses between breaths, consciousness pauses between identities. This pause allows outdated assumptions to dissolve without being replaced prematurely. If the new identity arrived too quickly, it would be built on unexamined remnants of the old one. The night prevents that. In this space, you are not meant to decide who you are. You are meant to release who you are not. This release often happens without conscious effort. You may find that certain labels no longer resonate, certain ambitions feel hollow, certain fears lose their emotional charge. You do not actively discard them. They simply fall away, like leaves dropping when their season ends. The mind may interpret this as emptiness. It asks, "What now?" or "What am I supposed to do?" But the night does not provide instructions. It provides rest. It gives your system time to integrate what has already changed. Integration is invisible work. During the night between versions, your nervous system is learning to function without old reference points. It is adjusting to a different internal environment. This takes time. If rushed, the system defaults to familiar patterns out of habit, not necessity. This is why forcing clarity during this phase backfires. Any identity you grasp now will be provisional at best, constraining at worst. The night asks for patience, not answers. You may feel a subtle grief during this time, not for a specific loss, but for a sense of self that no longer feels accessible. This grief is not regression, it is acknowledgement. You are honoring what carried you this far, even as you release it. Grief marks the boundary between eras. You may also feel moments of quiet joy, unconnected to circumstances. A sense of relief without explanation. A feeling that something heavy has lifted, even if you cannot name what replaces it. These moments are signals that the transition is proceeding smoothly. The night between versions often brings vivid dreams, heightened intuition, or increased sensitivity. The usual filters are relaxed. The psyche is more open. Insights surface spontaneously, not as solutions, but as impressions, images, feelings. These are not meant to be analyzed yet. They are seeds. Seeds do not ask to be understood. They ask to be protected. Protect this night by not overexposing it, not explaining it to people who need linear narratives, not demanding productivity from yourself, not rushing to reassert control. Control belongs to the old identity. Trust belongs to the new. Trust is learned here. Trust that you do not need to define yourself to exist. Trust that clarity does not require effort. Trust that what is forming beneath the surface will reveal itself when it is coherent enough to stand. This night can feel lonely if you expect companionship in transformation, but it is not meant to be shared. It is an inward passage. Others may walk near you, but they cannot walk through it for you. This is not isolation, it is individuation. The mind will attempt to pull you back into familiar loops during this phase. It will suggest revisiting old plans, reactivating old worries, re-engaging old conflicts. This is not intuition, it is habit. Habit does not like uncertainty. It prefers known discomfort over unknown possibility. You do not need to fight these impulses. You only need to not follow them. Each time you choose stillness over reaction, the night deepens its work. Each time you allow uncertainty without filling it, the new identity gains stability. Eventually, the night ends not with a dramatic sunrise, but with a subtle shift. One morning, you wake up and something feels settled, not explained but aligned. Decisions feel easier. Direction feels natural. You are not trying to be someone new. You simply are. This is how the new version arrives, not announced, not forced, but embodied. The night between versions is brief compared to the years spent becoming who you were. Yet it carries disproportionate power. It determines whether the new level integrates cleanly or fractures under pressure. Honor this night. Let it be quiet. Let it be slow. Let it be unresolved. You are not meant to know who you are becoming yet. You are meant to let yourself change without interruption. Soon, movement will return. Identity will crystallize. Purpose will re-emerge, not as a chase, but as a natural expression. When it does, you will not feel like you stepped into a new life. You will feel like you finally arrived in the right one. For now, remain in the night. It is not an ending, it is the crossing. Chapter 12. Dreams, Symbols, and Subtle Messages. When the mind loosens its grip, communication changes form. Logic steps aside, and meaning arrives indirectly. During periods of transition, consciousness speaks in symbols, sensations, and images rather than instructions. This is why dreams intensify when you are between versions. This is why synchronicities cluster. This is why certain words, numbers, or images repeat until they catch your attention. These are not coincidences. They are translations. The deeper layers of awareness do not speak in sentences. They speak in patterns. When you are crossing into a new level, these layers become more active because they are less constrained by the identity you are releasing. They use the language they have always used: metaphor, feeling, impression. Dreams are the most obvious channel. You may notice your dreams becoming more vivid, emotional, or strange. Old places appear. Familiar people behave differently. Scenes shift abruptly. These dreams are not meant to be decoded literally. They are not predictions. They are reorganizations. The psyche is sorting memory, identity, and possibility, deciding what travels forward and what dissolves. A dream about an old house does not mean the past is returning. It means the structure is being reviewed. A dream about water does not mean emotion is overwhelming you. It means movement is underway. Symbols are fluid. Their meaning depends on your relationship to them, not on fixed interpretations. What matters is not what the symbol means, but how it feels. The emotional tone is the message. If a dream leaves you calm, it is integrating. If it leaves you unsettled, it is releasing. If it leaves you curious, it is pointing forward. Outside of dreams, subtle messages arrive through repetition. You hear the same phrase from different people. You encounter the same theme in unrelated contexts. A book falls open to a sentence that feels addressed to you. A memory surfaces unprompted. These moments are not mystical interruptions. They are alignments. When your internal state shifts, your perception reorganizes. You notice what matches your frequency. Meaning emerges not because reality changed, but because your attention did. This is why these messages cannot be forced. Searching aggressively for signs creates distortion. The mind projects significance where there is none. But when you are relaxed, receptive, and grounded, the messages land naturally. They feel gentle, not urgent, clear, not dramatic. The subtle messages do not tell you what to do. They tell you what is already true. They confirm alignment. They reassure without promising. They guide without controlling. Often they simply remind you that you are not alone in the process. You may also notice bodily symbols during this time. Sensations that arise without obvious cause. Tightness releasing unexpectedly. Warmth spreading through the chest. A sudden urge to rest, move, or be still. The body communicates faster than the mind. It registers shifts before they become conceptual. Treat these sensations as information, not problems. A heaviness may indicate something completing. A lightness may indicate readiness. A pause may indicate integration. Nothing here requires fixing. The mistake many people make is to demand clarity from subtle language. They want direct answers, timelines, and outcomes. But subtle messages are not blueprints. They are confirmations. They tell you that you are oriented correctly, not where you will end up. The future is not meant to be known at this stage. It is meant to be felt. This is why trust deepens now. Not blind trust, but experiential trust. You begin to notice that when you follow what feels quietly aligned, things unfold with less resistance. Not instantly, but coherently. Effort decreases. Friction softens. The system rewards attunement. Symbols also arrive through emotional reactions. You may find yourself unexpectedly moved by certain music, stories, or images. Something resonates beyond logic. This resonance is not nostalgia, it is recognition. Parts of you are waking up to frequencies they remember. These reactions are invitations, not to chase meaning but to allow expansion. When a symbol repeats, do not ask, "What does this mean?" Ask, "What is this activating in me?" The answer will not arrive as a sentence. It will arrive as a shift. During this phase, journaling can be helpful, not to analyze but to witness. Write down impressions without interpretation. Record dreams without decoding. Notice patterns without conclusions. This creates a bridge between conscious and unconscious without collapsing the space too soon. You are not meant to understand everything immediately. Understanding arrives after integration. The subtle messages will change as you stabilize. What feels mysterious now will feel obvious later. You will look back and see that guidance was present all along, but it spoke softly because you were learning how to listen. Listening is the skill being developed here, not listening for answers, listening for alignment. When you are aligned, action becomes simple. Choices feel clean. Direction emerges organically. You stop seeking reassurance because your internal calibration becomes reliable. The symbols fade when they are no longer needed. Dreams return to baseline. Synchronicities spread out. The nervous system settles. This is not a loss of magic. It is a sign that the message has been received. Until then, treat this phase with reverence. Not because it is mystical, but because it is precise. Consciousness is reorganizing itself through you. It is using every channel available to communicate coherence. Your role is not to interpret perfectly, but to remain open without grasping. Tonight, notice what gently catches your attention. Notice what repeats without demanding focus. Notice what feels quietly significant. These are not instructions, they are confirmations. You are moving in the right direction, even if the path is not yet visible. The language of the transition is subtle because it is teaching you something essential. You do not need certainty to be guided. You only need presence, and presence is already here. Chapter 13. The Illusion of Nothing Happening. There is a phase in every real transformation where it appears as though nothing is happening. No visible progress, no dramatic shifts, no external confirmation. Life looks the same from the outside, and this sameness can feel unsettling after everything you have sensed internally. The mind, trained to measure movement by evidence, becomes restless here. It asks, if this is real, why can't I see it? This question is natural, and it is also misleading. The illusion of nothing happening arises because the most significant changes do not announce themselves through immediate results. They reorganize foundations. They alter structures beneath the surface. They move silently, precisely, and often invisibly. What you are experiencing now is not stagnation, it is incubation. Incubation never looks like progress. During this phase, the old momentum has already stopped, but the new momentum has not yet begun. The space between feels empty only because you are accustomed to constant motion. But stillness is not absence, it is preparation. The seed does not sprout the moment it is planted. It settles first. When you feel as though nothing is happening, it is often because the system is consolidating gains. Internal shifts are stabilizing, new neural pathways are reinforcing themselves, emotional baselines are resetting, identity is reconfiguring quietly so it can hold what is coming without fracturing. This work cannot be rushed, and it cannot be seen. The illusion intensifies because the mind compares the present to the past. It remembers moments when change felt obvious and exciting. It forgets that those moments were preceded by long periods of unseen development. You did not arrive here suddenly. You arrived through accumulation. Accumulation is subtle. You may notice that your days feel neutral. Not bad, not extraordinary, just steady. This neutrality can be misinterpreted as boredom or loss of direction, but neutrality is the platform upon which sustainable change is built. It is the state in which you are no longer reacting to the past or chasing the future. From neutrality, clarity emerges naturally. The danger in this phase is not inactivity, it is interference. When you believe nothing is happening, you may be tempted to create movement artificially, to stir something, to provoke change, to return to familiar patterns just to feel alive again. This urge is understandable. Intensity once signaled growth, but at this level, intensity would destabilize what is integrating. Doing less is not falling behind, it is staying aligned. The illusion persists because the mind wants reassurance. It wants proof that the internal experience is valid. But transformation does not provide proof on demand. It asks for trust in sequence. First, the shift, then the silence, then the structure. Finally, the manifestation. You are between silence and structure now. This is why external life feels paused, not because the universe has stalled, but because it is recalibrating timing. It is coordinating variables you cannot see. People, opportunities, and circumstances are being repositioned to match your new state. This coordination takes time because it involves more than you. You are not the only variable. When nothing appears to be happening, it is often because something complex is happening slowly. Precision requires patience. Rushed outcomes collapse. Aligned outcomes endure. You may notice subtle indicators during this phase. Increased ease in small moments, reduced emotional volatility, clearer boundaries without effort. These are not minor improvements. They are signs that the system is stabilizing at a higher baseline. Stability is the prerequisite for momentum. The mind, however, prefers acceleration. It confuses speed with progress. It fears that if nothing changes quickly, nothing will change at all. This fear is not intuitive. It is conditioned. It comes from environments where worth depended on visible output. You are no longer in that environment. Here, progress is measured by coherence, not performance. The illusion of nothing happening also arises because the old reference points are gone. You no longer feel driven by fear, urgency, or lack. Without these motivators, action feels different, quieter, more deliberate. The absence of pressure can feel like absence of purpose until you realize that purpose no longer needs pressure to exist. Purpose settles when it is real. You may feel tempted to revisit old goals just to regain a sense of direction. But if those goals no longer energize you, forcing them back into focus will create internal conflict. Letting them go creates space for goals that match who you are now. Space feels empty before it feels full. This is the paradox of the illusion. The very moment you believe nothing is happening is often the moment you are closest to a breakthrough. Not because the breakthrough is dramatic, but because it is aligned. Aligned change does not shout, it arrives quietly and stays. If you listen carefully, you may notice that your intuition feels calmer during this phase. Less insistent, more assured. It does not push you toward action. It invites you to wait without anxiety. This calm is the signal. It tells you that the system is working. Trust this signal. Tonight, resist the urge to measure your progress by external standards. Resist the temptation to label stillness as failure. Resist the impulse to manufacture meaning where integration is occurring. Nothing happening is a perspective, not a reality. What is happening is just happening at a depth that does not seek attention. Soon, movement will return. Opportunities will present themselves naturally. Decisions will feel obvious. You will look back and realize that this quiet phase was the turning point, the moment when everything rearranged itself without drama. Until then, remain where you are. Do not rush the process. Do not doubt the work. Do not abandon the stillness. The illusion of nothing happening dissolves the moment results appear. But by then, the work will already be done. You are not waiting. You are integrating. And integration is the most productive phase of all. Chapter 14. Releasing without ritual or struggle. There comes a point in transformation when letting go no longer requires effort. No ceremony, no dramatic declaration, no final confrontation with the past. What once demanded force now dissolves through recognition alone. This is the stage where release becomes natural, not because you tried harder, but because holding on stopped making sense. Most people are taught that release is something you do, that you must decide, work, cleanse, forgive, or process your way out of attachment. But real release happens differently. It happens when the nervous system no longer needs what it once clung to. Attachment is never about the thing itself. It is about regulation. We hold on to habits, identities, relationships, and beliefs because they once helped us feel safe, oriented, or connected. When those needs are met in other ways, attachment loosens on its own. This is why forcing release rarely works. It removes the object, not the function. You may have noticed that certain things are falling away without effort now. Thoughts that used to loop simply stop mid-sentence. Emotional reactions that once escalated lose momentum. Old desires no longer pull with urgency. This is not discipline at work. It is obsolescence. The system has updated. Releasing without struggle feels almost anticlimactic. There is no sense of victory, no relief rush, just a quiet noticing. I don't need this anymore. The absence feels neutral, not painful. This neutrality is the sign that release is complete. Struggle belongs to earlier stages. Earlier, release felt like loss because the system still relied on what it was asked to give up. Now the reliance has dissolved. The function has been replaced. Safety is internal. Orientation is internal. Identity is internal. Without dependency, release becomes simple. You are not abandoning parts of yourself. You are retiring them. This retirement does not require explanation. You do not need to justify why something no longer matters. You do not need to convince yourself or others. You simply stop engaging. Energy withdraws. Attention moves elsewhere. The old fades naturally. This is why rituals feel unnecessary now. Rituals are useful when the mind needs closure, when identity still negotiates with the past, when symbolism helps the system process change. But when change has already occurred internally, ritual adds nothing. It becomes redundant. You may feel surprised by how little emotion accompanies this phase. After everything you've moved through, you might expect fireworks. Instead, there is calm. This calm is not numbness, it is resolution. Resolution feels quiet. The mind may try to revisit what has already released, just to check. It may reintroduce old thoughts, replay old scenarios, test old reactions. This is not regression. It is verification. The system is confirming that the old hooks no longer work. When they don't, confidence builds without effort. You begin to trust your evolution, not because you believe in it, but because you experience it. You no longer fear slipping back, because there is nothing to slip back into. The structure is gone. This is the difference between suppression and release. Suppression requires vigilance. Release requires nothing. You may notice that your language changes during this phase. You stop talking about what you're working through. You stop identifying with healing narratives. You stop framing yourself as a project. Not because you are finished growing, but because growth no longer feels like repair. Growth now feels like expression. The absence of struggle can feel disorienting if you are accustomed to equating effort with worth. You may wonder if you are being complacent, if you should be doing more, if you are missing something. These questions come from an old operating system. The new one does not need constant maintenance. Releasing without struggle also means forgiving without analysis, understanding without revisiting, accepting without reliving. Memory remains, but charge dissipates. The past loses its gravitational pull. This does not mean you forget what happened. It means it no longer defines what happens next. At this stage, advice becomes unnecessary. You are no longer looking for methods to let go. You are simply living in a way that makes certain attachments incompatible. The lifestyle of your consciousness has changed. You eat differently. You move differently. You respond differently. You choose differently. Not because you decided to, but because you are different. This is why explanation feels excessive. When someone asks why you no longer do something, you may struggle to answer. Not because you are hiding anything, but because there is no story. There is no conflict. There is just a shift. I don't need that anymore is the only truth available. This phase is marked by simplicity, fewer internal negotiations, less self-talk, more direct experience. You live closer to the moment because nothing is pulling you backward or projecting you forward. Presence becomes default. Releasing without struggle is not passive, it is precise. It means you are no longer leaking energy into outdated structures. That energy becomes available for what is forming now. This availability is what allows the next phase to arrive cleanly. Tonight, notice what you are no longer managing. Notice what no longer requires effort. Notice what has quietly exited your inner world without protest. Do not resurrect it for closure. Do not analyze it for meaning. Do not memorialize it unnecessarily. Let the absence speak for itself. This is not loss. It is efficiency. What remains after effortless release is not emptiness. It is capacity. Capacity for deeper presence, clearer action, truer alignment. You are no longer clearing space. The space is already clear. And what comes next will enter without resistance, because nothing stands in the way anymore. Chapter 15. Trusting the rearrangement. There is a phase in every transformation where logic must step aside, not because logic is flawed, but because it cannot see far enough ahead to be useful. This is the phase where life begins to rearrange itself around you, and the only way through it is trust. Not blind trust, not forced optimism, but a grounded willingness to allow movement without demanding immediate explanation. Rearrangement is rarely comfortable. It involves shifts you did not plan, pauses you did not request, and redirections you did not anticipate. Things change position before their purpose becomes clear. What once anchored you may loosen. What once felt distant may draw closer. The pattern is not obvious while it is happening, and that is by design. If you could see the full picture now, the growth would not complete. Trusting the rearrangement means accepting that clarity often follows movement, not the other way around. The mind wants certainty before change. Consciousness requires change before certainty. This reversal is what unsettles people most. You may notice pieces of your life being moved without your direct involvement. Schedules shift. Conversations end sooner than expected. Opportunities dissolve quietly. New possibilities appear without urgency. None of this feels dramatic enough to justify concern, yet it unsettles the part of you that prefers control. Control is an old survival language. The rearrangement phase tests whether you can remain present without micromanaging outcomes, whether you can stay open without gripping the past, whether you can allow uncertainty without collapsing into fear or rushing into replacement. This is not a test you pass or fail. It is a capacity you grow into. The rearrangement is not random. It follows the logic of alignment rather than preference. It removes friction points. It separates what no longer matches your frequency. It repositions you relative to people, environments, and timelines that resonate with who you are now. This is why it can feel disorienting. You are no longer oriented by familiarity. You are being oriented by coherence. Coherence does not feel familiar at first. It feels calm, spacious, and oddly quiet. Without the drama of struggle, The mind wonders if something is missing. What is missing is resistance. As the rearrangement unfolds, you may feel moments of vulnerability. Not because you are unsafe, but because you are not buffered by old defenses. You are more exposed to your own experience. This exposure can feel tender. It is also where intimacy with life deepens. Trust does not mean assuming everything will be perfect. It means assuming everything is purposeful. Purpose does not always look kind in the moment. Sometimes it looks like delay. Sometimes it looks like redirection. Sometimes it looks like things falling apart without immediate replacement. But if you observe closely, you will notice that what leaves creates space, and what enters fits more cleanly than what came before. The rearrangement is intelligent. You do not need to understand it to benefit from it. You only need to stop interrupting it. Interrupting happens through second-guessing, rushing decisions, clinging to what is dissolving, or forcing clarity prematurely. Trust is not passive. It is restrained participation. You still show up. You still respond. You still act when action feels aligned. But you stop trying to steer every outcome. You stop interpreting every shift as a verdict on your worth or direction. You let the process breathe. During this phase, intuition becomes quieter but more reliable. It does not shout instructions. It nudges. It creates subtle pulls. It highlights what feels easeful rather than impressive. Following these signals feels almost too simple, which is why the mind often doubts them. Simplicity can feel suspicious when you are used to struggle. You may be tempted to revert to old strategies during moments of uncertainty, to push harder, to overthink, to seek reassurance from external sources. This does not mean you are failing. It means you are learning where trust still needs to deepen. Each time you choose to wait instead of forcing, the rearrangement gains momentum. This phase is also marked by timing that feels strange. Things happen neither too early nor too late, but not when you expect them. This is not inefficiency, it is precision. The rearrangement coordinates variables you cannot see, involving people, places, and circumstances beyond your control. Trying to control timing here is like trying to micromanage the weather. Your role is to remain responsive, not directive. As trust stabilizes, anxiety decreases, not because uncertainty disappears, but because your relationship to it changes. You stop interpreting not knowing as danger. You begin to experience it as openness. Possibility replaces fear. This is the moment where faith becomes embodied rather than conceptual. You are no longer trusting an outcome. You are trusting the process itself. Trusting the rearrangement also means accepting that some answers will arrive only in hindsight. You will understand later why something had to move when it did, why a door closed quietly, why a pause was necessary, why a redirection spared you from a path that looked right but was not aligned. For now, understanding is secondary, alignment is primary. Tonight, notice where life is subtly repositioning you, where things are shifting without force, where you are being guided away from friction and toward coherence. Resist the urge to label these movements as good or bad. They are neither. They are adjustments. Let the rearrangement continue without interference. Let yourself be carried by intelligence rather than driven by fear. You are not losing control. You are relinquishing what no longer serves you. Trust here is not surrender to chaos. It is cooperation with order. And when the rearrangement settles, you will find yourself standing in a configuration that feels strangely obvious, as if things could not have unfolded any other way, because they couldn't. This is how alignment completes itself. Chapter 16. The First Signs of Alignment. Alignment does not arrive with a grand announcement. It does not declare itself loudly or demand recognition. Its first signs are subtle, almost easy to miss if you are still looking for drama. After all the inner shifts, the dissolutions, the quiet nights of not knowing, alignment enters gently, like a change in gravity rather than a change in scenery. You feel it before you see it. The first sign is ease. Not the kind of ease that comes from avoidance or numbing, but a grounded sense that you are no longer pushing against life. Things still require effort, but the effort feels clean. You act without bracing. You respond without rehearsing. There is less friction between what you feel and what you do. Ease is not laziness. It is congruence. You may notice that decisions take less time, not because you care less, but because clarity no longer needs debate. The internal arguments quiet down. You know when something is a yes or a no without constructing a case. This knowing is calm. It does not rush you. It does not demand proof. Alignment simplifies choice. Another early sign is synchronicity, but not in the sensational way it is often portrayed. It shows up as timing that just works, conversations that happen when they need to, information arriving at the right moment, small conveniences that remove obstacles before you trip over them. Nothing miraculous, nothing flashy, just a sense that the path is clearing itself. You stop feeling late to your own life. Alignment also changes your relationship to effort. You still show up, but you no longer feel responsible for forcing outcomes. You do your part, then release the rest. There is a natural handoff between action and trust. This handoff feels relieving, not risky. Control loosens because it is no longer needed. You may also notice a shift in how people respond to you. Without changing your personality, you feel more settled in yourself. Others sense this. Interactions become smoother. Misunderstandings resolve faster or do not arise at all. Some connections deepen effortlessly. Others fade without conflict. Alignment reorganizes relationships without confrontation. One of the clearest signs is emotional regulation. You still feel deeply, but emotions move through you rather than defining you. You recover faster. You do not spiral as far. You are less reactive to things that once felt personal. This is not detachment. It is resilience. Your baseline has changed. You may also notice that your energy is more consistent. Instead of dramatic highs and lows, there is steadiness. You do not need intensity to feel alive. You do not need urgency to feel purposeful. You operate from a sustainable rhythm. Sustainability is alignment's signature. There is also a noticeable shift in what you tolerate. You become less willing to endure misalignment, not out of judgment, but out of clarity. Situations that drain you stand out quickly. You do not negotiate with them as long. You do not rationalize discomfort. You adjust or disengage without drama. Boundaries become instinctive. At this stage, you may feel tempted to rush ahead, to capitalize on the feeling, to make big moves simply because things feel good. This impulse is understandable, but alignment does not require acceleration. It benefits from consolidation. The system is still stabilizing. Let alignment root itself. Another sign appears as a quiet confidence, not bravado, not certainty about outcomes, confidence in your ability to respond, confidence that you will handle whatever comes without losing yourself. This confidence does not announce itself. It sits beneath your actions like a steady current. You trust yourself more than your plans. Alignment also alters your perception of time. You feel less pressure to get there. The future does not loom. The present feels sufficient. This does not mean you lack ambition. It means ambition is no longer fueled by anxiety. You are not chasing completion. You are inhabiting direction. You may still encounter challenges. Alignment does not eliminate difficulty. It changes your relationship to it. Challenges feel purposeful rather than punishing. You engage with them directly instead of resisting them emotionally. You learn without self-blame. Learning becomes fluid. One subtle but profound sign is gratitude without effort. You are not forcing appreciation or counting blessings. Gratitude arises naturally because you feel resourced. Even when circumstances are imperfect, you recognize that something fundamental is working. This recognition grounds you. You may also notice that your inner dialogue softens. The tone becomes kinder, less evaluative, less dramatic. You speak to yourself as someone you trust. This internal relationship shift is one of the strongest indicators that alignment is real. External alignment follows internal respect. The first signs do not demand interpretation. They simply ask to be noticed. When you notice them without clinging, they stabilize. When you try to amplify them artificially, they destabilize. Let alignment be normal. Tonight, reflect gently on what has already shifted, where effort has decreased, where clarity has increased, where life feels less resistant. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations. You are not imagining this phase. You are not temporarily lucky. You are not in a good mood. You are aligned. Alignment does not promise a perfect future. It promises coherence in the present. And from coherence, the future organizes itself naturally. This is only the beginning. The signs will deepen. The structure will strengthen. What feels subtle now will become foundational. You will not need to convince yourself that you are on the right path. You will feel it. And that feeling will guide you more reliably than any plan ever could. Chapter 17. Holding more without tension. As alignment settles, a new challenge quietly emerges. Not the challenge of striving, but the challenge of capacity. You are no longer learning how to reach the next level. You are learning how to live there without tightening, bracing, or reverting to old habits of contraction. This is the phase where growth asks a subtler question. Can you hold more without turning it into pressure? For much of your life, expansion was paired with strain. More responsibility meant more stress. More visibility meant more anxiety. More opportunity meant more fear of loss. Your system learned that more required armor, that success demanded vigilance, that ease was temporary and had to be protected. That association is now dissolving, but the body may not know this yet. Holding more without tension means allowing abundance, clarity, love, and stability to exist without preparing for their disappearance. It means staying open when things go well. It means resisting the impulse to self-sabotage, overanalyze, or brace for impact when life begins to flow. This is harder than it sounds. Struggle is familiar, ease is not. When things improve, you may notice a subtle tightening in your chest or shoulders. A quiet thought that says, "Don't get used to this," or "Something must be coming." This response is not pessimism. It is conditioning. The nervous system is scanning for threat because historically, good moments were followed by disappointment. Your task is not to argue with this response. Your task is to stay present while it passes. Capacity is built through exposure without collapse. When you allow good things to exist without immediately managing them, the system learns something new. Safety can coexist with expansion. Over time, the tightening decreases. The breath stays open. The body relaxes even as life grows fuller. This is how tension releases at higher levels. Holding more also means allowing complexity without overwhelm. You may find that your life now contains more variables, more moving parts, more nuance. This does not mean you are losing simplicity. It means your system can handle layered experiences without fragmenting. Complexity held with coherence feels calm. Complexity held with fear feels chaotic. You are learning the difference. At this stage, you may notice that your reactions to success are quieter than expected. No adrenaline rush, no dramatic celebration. Just a grounded sense of, "This fits." This can feel anticlimactic if you expected fireworks, but it is actually a sign of maturity. The system recognizes that this level is sustainable. Sustainability is the goal, not excitement. Holding more without tension also requires releasing the identity of the one who is always trying. You are no longer earning your place through effort. You are occupying it through alignment. This shift can feel disorienting if your sense of worth was tied to struggle. You may wonder who you are if you are not pushing. The answer reveals itself slowly. You are someone who responds rather than reacts. Someone who allows rather than forces. Someone who trusts rather than braces. This identity is quieter but far more stable. As capacity increases, discernment sharpens. You become more selective about where you place your energy, not because you are withdrawn, but because you understand cost. You know that overextension creates tension, and tension constricts flow. Saying no becomes an act of self-respect. You may also notice that you stop over-preparing. You no longer rehearse every conversation. You no longer anticipate every outcome. You trust your ability to adapt in real time. This trust reduces mental load. Space opens up. Mental spaciousness is a sign that capacity has increased. Another subtle shift occurs in how you experience responsibility. It no longer feels heavy or consuming. You carry it without merging with it. You understand what is yours to handle and what is not. This separation prevents burnout. Holding more does not mean holding everything. At this level, self-care stops being a corrective measure and becomes a baseline. You do not rest because you are exhausted. You rest because rest maintains coherence. You do not slow down because something is wrong. You slow down because pacing preserves clarity. You are no longer recovering. You are maintaining. You may encounter moments where old patterns attempt to reassert themselves under the guise of being realistic. Thoughts like, "This won't last," or "I should prepare for the worst," may arise. These are echoes. They do not require action. They require acknowledgement without obedience. Each time you choose not to tense around these thoughts, capacity expands further. Holding more without tension also means allowing yourself to be seen at this new level. You may feel an urge to minimize your success or downplay your alignment to avoid standing out. This urge comes from earlier environments where visibility carried risk. You are no longer in those environments. Letting yourself be seen without shrinking is a form of regulation. It teaches the system that presence does not equal danger. Over time, visibility feels neutral rather than charged. Neutrality is freedom. As this chapter integrates, you may feel a sense of quiet confidence that does not fluctuate with circumstances. You trust your baseline. You trust your ability to navigate complexity. You trust that you do not need to brace for life to happen. This trust allows you to inhabit expansion rather than visit it temporarily. Tonight, notice where you still tighten around good things. Notice without judgment, then soften deliberately. Breathe, stay present. Let the moment pass without interference. This is not about controlling your response. It is about allowing your system to learn something new. You are safe to hold more. You are capable of sustaining alignment. You do not need tension to remain grounded. The more you allow ease to be normal, the more capacity you build. And the more capacity you build, the less you will recognize the version of yourself who believed growth had to hurt. This is how expansion becomes home, not through effort, not through vigilance, but through relaxed presence. You are not just reaching a higher level, you are learning how to live there. Chapter 18. When reality starts responding differently. At some point, the internal work crosses a threshold and reality begins to answer back. Not dramatically, not all at once, but unmistakably. You notice it in small deviations from the expected. Outcomes soften, resistance thins, situations resolve with less effort than before. It feels as though the world is meeting you halfway instead of standing in your way. This is not luck, this is feedback. Reality responds differently when your internal posture changes. When you stop pushing, life stops pushing back. When you stop bracing, circumstances lose their edge. The external world mirrors coherence long before it delivers rewards. You may notice that conversations unfold more smoothly. Words land without being sharpened. Misunderstandings correct themselves without escalation. You are heard without repeating yourself. This is not persuasion. It is resonance. When your energy is settled, communication becomes efficient. You may also notice timing improving in subtle ways. You arrive when something opens. You miss what would have delayed you. You choose paths that save time without planning to. These are not coincidences stacked in your favor. They are consequences of alignment. When your internal rhythm steadies, you move in sync with what is already unfolding. This synchronization feels effortless. Another sign appears in how obstacles present themselves. They still exist, but they are no longer confrontational. They invite adjustment rather than force. You pivot instead of collide. You reroute instead of resist. Solutions emerge through responsiveness rather than strategy. This is reality cooperating. You may feel surprised by how little emotional charge these moments carry. In the past, a positive shift would have triggered excitement or relief. Now it registers as confirmation, calm, almost expected. This neutrality is not indifference. It is trust settling in. Trust changes what feels noteworthy. You may also notice that opportunities feel lighter. They do not come wrapped in pressure. They do not demand immediate sacrifice. They fit. When something is not aligned, it does not tempt you the way it once did. The body knows before the mind weighs in. Discernment has replaced urgency. As reality responds differently, You may feel an impulse to analyze what changed, to identify the technique or moment that caused the shift. This impulse is natural but unnecessary. Alignment is not triggered by a single action. It is the cumulative effect of coherence maintained over time. The response you see now is delayed reflection. Life always answers late because it must reorganize matter to match energy. When the answer arrives, it often feels understated compared to the internal journey that preceded it. This mismatch can make you doubt its significance. But significance is not measured by intensity. It is measured by sustainability. What arrives now stays. You may also notice changes in how others engage with you. Some people step closer, drawn by your steadiness. Others drift away, no longer able to resonate with your pace. These shifts happen without conflict. There is less drama because there is less friction. Alignment clarifies compatibility. As reality responds, responsibility increases subtly, not as burden, but as influence. Your presence carries weight. Your words matter more. Your choices ripple further. This does not require you to be careful. It requires you to be honest. Integrity becomes essential at this stage. You cannot fake alignment and sustain it. This is why some things fall away quickly when you ignore your internal signals. Reality responds to coherence, not intention. When you deviate from your own alignment, feedback becomes immediate. This is not punishment. It is precision. Precision is the hallmark of this phase. You may find that guidance becomes situational rather than symbolic. Instead of signs and dreams, you receive clear openings and closures. Doors open cleanly or remain closed without ambiguity. This clarity reduces mental strain. You stop guessing. Guessing belongs to misalignment. There may still be moments when reality seems slow or unresponsive. These moments are not regressions. They are calibration points. The system checks for consistency. It waits to see if alignment holds without reinforcement. When it does, response resumes. Tonight, notice where life feels smoother than it used to, where effort produces more result, where silence no longer feels empty. These are not random improvements. They are replies. Reality is answering the way you are asking now, not through force, not through demand, but through coherence. You are not bending the world to your will. You are meeting it in balance. As this dialogue continues, you will rely less on belief and more on observation. You will not need to convince yourself that things are aligning. You will see it, quietly, repeatedly, and you will understand that the world did not change suddenly. You did. And reality, attentive as ever, adjusted accordingly. Chapter 19. The responsibility of a higher frequency. As alignment deepens and reality responds with greater ease, a quieter truth reveals itself. Expansion is not only a gift, it is a responsibility. Not a burden placed upon you, but a natural consequence of operating at a higher frequency. When your internal state stabilizes at this level, your impact increases whether you intend it or not. This responsibility does not arrive as pressure. It arrives as awareness. You begin to notice that your words land differently now. Your presence affects rooms without effort. Your emotional state subtly influences outcomes beyond your immediate control. This is not power in the dramatic sense. It is coherence becoming influential. At lower frequencies, chaos absorbs impact. At higher frequencies, clarity amplifies it. This is why integrity becomes non-negotiable at this stage. Not moral perfection, not rigid self-policing, but congruence. What you think, feel, say, and do must align more often than not. When they do not, feedback is immediate. You feel it as internal friction. Reality reflects it as resistance, and this is not punishment, it is precision training. The responsibility of a higher frequency is not about being careful, it is about being honest. When your internal state carries weight, even small misalignments create noticeable effects. You cannot afford to ignore your own signals anymore. Doing so disrupts coherence quickly. But this responsibility is also liberating. You no longer waste energy pretending. You stop maintaining versions of yourself that contradict your truth. You simplify your life because complexity without coherence becomes uncomfortable. This simplification is not reduction, it is refinement. You choose differently now. You may notice that certain behaviors feel heavy almost immediately. Overindulgence, dishonesty, avoidance, self-betrayal. These things no longer feel neutral. They create an internal disturbance that is impossible to ignore. This disturbance is not guilt. It is misalignment registering clearly. At this level, your system speaks fluently. The responsibility is not to be perfect. It is to be responsive. You respond to discomfort by adjusting, not suppressing. You respond to clarity by acting, not delaying. You respond to intuition by trusting, not debating endlessly. This responsiveness keeps the frequency clean. You may also feel a growing sense of stewardship, not over others, but over your own state. You understand that how you show up matters, not because you must perform, but because your state shapes your experience. This awareness is sobering at first. You realize that blaming circumstances feels hollow. You see how much influence you actually have, not over outcomes directly, but over the conditions that produce them. This influence cannot be abdicated. Ignoring it does not remove it. It simply creates distortion. So you take ownership gently, not with control, with presence. Another aspect of this responsibility is restraint. You do not react as impulsively. You do not indulge every emotion, not because emotions are wrong, but because you understand their ripple effects. You choose when to engage and when to let pass. This is not suppression. It is discernment. You may notice that drama feels expensive now. It costs too much energy for too little return. You step back from situations that thrive on reactivity. You no longer need to prove your stance. You let clarity speak through consistency. Consistency is the new authority. As your frequency stabilizes, you may feel called to create, contribute, or lead in subtle ways. Not necessarily publicly, often quietly. Through example, through presence, through the way you navigate complexity without escalating it. This is not obligation. It is expression. The responsibility of a higher frequency also includes self-compassion. You understand that regulation matters, that rest maintains clarity, that pushing yourself into depletion distorts your state. Caring for your capacity becomes an ethical choice, not a luxury. You protect your nervous system because it protects your alignment. There will be moments when you falter, when old habits resurface briefly, when fatigue lowers your awareness. These moments are not failures, they are signals to recalibrate. At this level, recovery is fast when you respond instead of judge. Judgment destabilizes, adjustment restores. You may also notice that others respond to your state more than your words. Advice carries less weight than example. You influence without intending to. This can feel uncomfortable if you are used to blending in, but it is simply the effect of coherence. You are not responsible for others' choices. You are responsible for your state. This distinction matters. Tonight, notice where your awareness has sharpened, where you feel less able to ignore yourself, where alignment feels like a quiet obligation you willingly accept. This is not pressure. It is maturity. You are no longer experimenting with growth. You are inhabiting it. The responsibility of a higher frequency is not about carrying the world. It is about carrying yourself cleanly through it. When you do, the world responds accordingly. Not because you demand it, but because coherence invites coherence, and that invitation is always answered. Chapter 20. Moving without explaining yourself. At a certain point in alignment, something subtle but decisive shifts. You stop feeling the need to explain yourself, not out of defensiveness, not out of withdrawal, but because explanation no longer feels relevant to your movement. You simply move. This is not secrecy, it is sovereignty. Earlier versions of you needed understanding to feel safe. You explained your choices to be accepted, your pauses to be tolerated, your changes to be justified. Explanation was a bridge between your inner world and external approval. It helped you belong. But alignment changes the function of explanation. When you trust your own coherence, you no longer require agreement to proceed. You are not hiding what you are doing. You are simply not narrating it in advance. You allow actions to speak when they are ready. This feels unfamiliar at first. You may notice moments where you would normally over-clarify, but something in you stays quiet, not tense, just settled. You realize you do not owe context for choices that are internally aligned. The urge to preempt misunderstanding fades. Silence becomes sufficient. Moving without explaining yourself does not mean becoming cold or dismissive. It means recognizing that not everyone needs access to your process. Some people only need to experience the outcome. Others are not meant to follow every step. This discernment is not arrogance, it is efficiency. Explanation consumes energy. At earlier stages, it helped regulate uncertainty. At this stage, it creates friction. You feel it immediately when you over-explain. Your body tightens. Your clarity dulls. The alignment wavers. So you stop. You let decisions unfold without commentary. You let transitions happen without announcements. You trust that those who need to understand will in time without persuasion. This is not withdrawal from connection, it is refinement of it. You may notice that conversations change. You speak more concisely. You answer fewer questions you are not actually being asked. You allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it. This can feel uncomfortable to others who are accustomed to constant reassurance. That discomfort is not yours to manage. Moving without explaining yourself also reveals who is aligned with your pace. Some people respond with trust. They sense your stability and adjust naturally. Others push for justification. They ask for reassurance, timelines, or reasoning. This is information. You are not required to convince anyone of your direction. If someone needs explanation to feel secure around your growth, they may be oriented to an older version of you. That does not make them wrong. It makes the misalignment visible. Visibility clarifies relationships. This phase teaches you the difference between communication and permission seeking. Communication is sharing when it feels clean. Permission seeking is explaining to feel allowed. One strengthens alignment, the other weakens it. You learn to recognize the difference in your body. When sharing feels expansive, you share. When explaining feels constrictive, you stop. This internal cue becomes reliable. Moving without explaining yourself also deepens trust in timing. You no longer feel pressure to justify progress or prove momentum. You let things unfold at their natural pace. When something is ready to be known, it becomes obvious without effort. Premature disclosure often destabilizes alignment. You may feel moments of guilt when you withhold explanation out of habit. That guilt comes from an old agreement, that clarity must be earned through transparency. You are learning a new agreement now, that clarity emerges through consistency. Consistency does not need explanation. Your actions become quieter but more decisive. You stop announcing intentions and start embodying them. You stop preparing others for your growth and allow them to experience it directly. This is not avoidance, it is embodiment. At this level, explanation is replaced by presence. People feel the difference even if they cannot articulate it. They sense your steadiness. They respond to your boundaries. They adjust to your pace. Words become secondary. Moving without explaining yourself does not isolate you. It attracts the right resonance. Those aligned with your frequency do not require justification. They recognize coherence instinctively. Those who demand explanation are often seeking control, not understanding. You are no longer available for that exchange. Tonight, notice where you are still explaining out of habit rather than necessity. Notice how your body responds when you pause instead. There is relief there. Space, authority without force. This is the authority of alignment. You do not need to convince. You do not need to announce. You do not need to defend. You move because movement is true. And truth does not require explanation to remain valid. It simply unfolds. Chapter 21. Living as the upgrade. There comes a moment when the idea of becoming falls away. Not because growth stops, but because it no longer feels like a pursuit. You are no longer reaching for the next version of yourself. You are inhabiting it. This is what it means to live as the upgrade. Living as the upgrade does not feel dramatic. It feels ordinary in the best way. You wake up and move through your day without narrating your progress. You do not check in with yourself to see if you are aligned. You simply are. The internal negotiations that once consumed you have quieted. Decisions happen. Responses flow. Life meets you where you stand. This is embodiment. At earlier stages, alignment required attention. You had to notice, regulate, adjust. Now it operates in the background, like a system that has learned its own rhythm. You trust yourself without monitoring. You allow emotions without managing them. You act without second-guessing. Trust becomes implicit. Living as the upgrade also means that self-improvement loses urgency. You are no longer fixing yourself. You are expressing yourself. Growth happens through experience rather than effort. You learn by living, not by correcting. This shift can feel strange if you are accustomed to constant refinement. You may wonder if you are becoming complacent, but complacency feels dull. This feels alive, grounded, and clear. You are not stagnating, you are stabilizing. At this level, challenges still appear, but they are met differently. You do not personalize difficulty. You do not spiral into self-analysis. You address what is in front of you, then move on. Recovery is fast because you no longer abandon yourself in the process. You stay present. Living as the upgrade also changes how you relate to the past. You no longer revisit old versions of yourself with shame or nostalgia. They feel distant but appreciated. You recognize that they did their job. You do not need to compare yourself to them to feel progress. Comparison dissolves. You may also notice that the future feels less charged. You still have intentions, but they do not dominate your attention. You trust that what is meant to unfold will do so in alignment with who you are now. This trust does not eliminate planning. It removes anxiety from it. Planning becomes practical, not emotional. At this stage, your energy is consistent. You do not oscillate wildly between motivation and burnout. You understand your limits and respect them. You pace yourself naturally. This pacing preserves clarity. Clarity is now your default state. Living as the upgrade means your values are no longer theoretical. They are embedded in how you move. Boundaries are maintained without explanation. Choices reflect your truth without announcement. You are not performing alignment, you are living it. Performance ends here. You may notice that people respond differently to you. Some feel more at ease around you. Others feel unsettled. This is not your responsibility to manage. Your role is not to make yourself comfortable for others at the expense of coherence. Coherence is your contribution. Living as the upgrade also involves humility. Not the humility of self-doubt, but the humility of presence. You do not need to be right. You do not need to be impressive. You do not need to lead unless it is natural. You allow others to be where they are without comparison. There is no rush to prove. You may still reflect. You may still learn. But the tone has changed. Curiosity replaces urgency. Exploration replaces correction. You are not chasing growth. You are allowing it to express through you. This is the difference between striving and living. Tonight, notice how little effort it takes to be yourself now. Notice how much of what once required discipline now feels natural. This is not because you became disciplined. It is because you became aligned. Alignment sustains itself. Living as the upgrade does not mean you are finished. It means you are integrated. From this place, future growth will feel less like a climb and more like a widening. You will not outgrow yourself again in the same way. You will evolve from within. This is the quiet reward of the journey you have just completed. Not perfection, not arrival, but embodiment. You are no longer becoming. You are living. And from here, everything that unfolds will do so through who you already are. Chapter 22. This is not the end. If you are waiting for a feeling of finality, it will not arrive. There is no moment where everything locks into place and remains unchanged. No permanent arrival. No closing chapter that signals completion. This is not because something is missing. It is because growth, when it is real, does not end. It changes form. What ends is effort. What ends is confusion. What ends is the sense that you were chasing something outside yourself. What continues is movement. This chapter exists not to conclude, but to orient you forward. To remind you that what you have stepped into is not a destination. It is a foundation. From here, life will keep unfolding, but it will do so from a different center. You are no longer seeking alignment. You are moving from it. This distinction matters. In the past, change felt like disruption. Now it will feel like refinement. Adjustments will come, but they will be smaller, more precise. You will not need to dismantle yourself again to grow. You will expand by adding depth, not by shedding identity. Future challenges will not question who you are. They will invite you to express it more fully. There may be moments when old doubts whisper again, when uncertainty reappears briefly. This does not mean you are backtracking. It means you are human. The difference now is that doubt no longer controls your movement. It passes through without stopping you. You trust your trajectory. What lies ahead will not require the same intensity you have just moved through. The initiation is complete. You have learned how to listen, how to release, how to regulate, how to move without forcing. These skills do not disappear. They become instinct. You will recognize future transitions earlier. You will respond with less resistance. You will integrate faster. This is what mastery looks like. Not dominance over life, but fluency within it. This is also where humility deepens. You understand that you do not control everything, and you no longer need to. You cooperate with what unfolds. You adjust without panic. You allow life to surprise you. Surprise becomes a feature, not a threat. As you continue forward, you may notice a growing sense of authorship. Not over outcomes, but over experience. You choose how you meet what arises. You decide when to engage and when to step back. You live with intention without rigidity. Rigidity belonged to earlier stages. You are not here to perfect yourself. You are here to express yourself. Expression is dynamic. It evolves with context. It adapts without losing essence. You will change again, but you will recognize yourself through the change. That recognition is what remains. If there is one thing to carry with you beyond this chapter, it is this. You no longer need permission to trust your own unfolding. You have seen what happens when you listen. You have felt the coherence that follows. That memory will guide you more reliably than any instruction. You may revisit these words someday and feel how far you have moved beyond them. That is not failure, that is success. This work is meant to be outgrown. Outgrowing is the sign of life. This is not the end because there is no end to awareness experiencing itself. There are only chapters that close so new expressions can emerge. You are now equipped to move through them without losing yourself. You know how to pause. You know how to wait. You know how to act. You know how to let go. These are not lessons you forget. So, as this chapter completes, do not look for closure. Look for continuity. Notice how your life continues to respond differently. Notice how your inner world remains steady even as circumstances change. That steadiness is your anchor. You are not finishing a journey. You are continuing one with clarity. Whatever comes next will meet you at the level you now inhabit, not the one you left behind. And when the next shift arrives, as it always will, you will recognize it, not as disruption, but as invitation. This is not the end. It is the beginning of moving forward without resistance. And that, quietly, changes everything.